On this day in history, March 11th, 1544, Torquato Tasso, Italian poet and educator, is born. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, going over the history of the poet. Torquato Tasso, born 1544, died 1595, Italian poet, son of Bernardo Tasso, was born at Sorrento on March 11th, 1544. He was brought up at Naples, where he lived with his mother and his only sister Cornelia, and was educated by the Jesuits. He was a precocious child and famous in Naples for his learning when, at 10 years old, he joined his father in exile in Rome. In 1557, he accompanied his father to the court of Urbino. Torquato, a handsome and brilliant lad, now became the companion in sports and studies of the young heir, Duke Francesco Maria della Rovere. He met there many of the most famous scholars of the day, including Albus Manutius and the critic Speroni. At Venice, whither his father went to superintend the printing of the Amadigi, 1560, he found himself the pet and prodigy of a distinguished literary circle. He was then sent to study law at Padua, but his distaste for the subject led Bernardo to allow his son to exchange the study of law for that of philosophy and poetry at Padua, and then at Bologna. In 1561, he published some poems, and before the end of 1562 produced a narrative poem, Rinaldo, in 12 cantos, which proposed to combine the regularity of the Virgilian with the attractions of the romantic epic. Tasso, who was still only 18 years old, sought to give the adventures of Roland a classic form. He was now famous. In 1565 he became attached to the learned court of Ferrara, at first in the service of the Cardinal Luigi de Este. The years between 1565 and 1570 seem to have been the happiest of Tasso's life, although his father's death in 1569 caused him profound pain. He was the idol of the most brilliant court in Italy. The princesses Lucrezia and Leonora de Este took him under their protection. He was admitted to their familiarity, and there is some reason to think that neither of them was indifferent to him personally. In 1570 he traveled to Paris with the cardinal. Frankness of speech and a certain habitual want of tact caused a disagreement. He left France next year and took service under Duke Alfonso II of Ferrara. The most important events in Tasso's biography during the following 4 years after the publication of the Aminta in 1573 and the completion of the Gerusalemme Liberata in 1574. The Aminta is a pastoral drama of very simple plot, but of exquisite lyrical charm. It was represented at Ferrara in the summer of 1573, at the critical moment when modern music, under Palestrina's impulse, was becoming the main art of Italy. The Gerusalemme Liberata occupies a larger space in the history of European literature, and is a more considerable work. Yet the commanding qualities of this epic poem, those which revealed Tasso's individuality and which made it a classic, beloved by the people no less than by persons of culture, are akin to the lyrical graces of Aminta. It was published in Tasso's 31st year, and was read to the Duke and to the Princess Lucrezia in the summer of 1575. As in the Rinaldo, so also in the Jerusalem Delivered, he aimed at ennobling the Italian epic by preserving strict unity of plot and heightening poetic diction. He chose Virgil for his model, took the First Crusade for subject, infused the fervor of religion into his conception of the hero Godfrey, but his own natural bias was for romance. Godfrey, a mixture of pious Aeneas and Tridentine Catholicism, is not the real hero of the Jerusalem. Fiery Rinaldo, Ruggiero, impulsive Tancredi, and the chivalrous Saracens, with whom they clash in love and war, divide our interest and divert it from Goffredo. The action of the epic turns on Armida, the beautiful witch, sent forth by the infernal senate to sow discord in the Christian camp. She is coveted to the true faith by her adoration for the crusading knight, and quits the scene with a phrase of the Virgin Mary on her lips. Brave Clorinda, donning armor like Marfisa, fighting in a duel with her devoted lover, and receiving baptism from his hands in her pathetic death. Erminia seeks refuge in the shepherd's hut. These lovely pagan women, so touching in their sorrows, so romantic in their adventures, so tender in their emotions, rivet our attention, while we skip the battles, religious ceremonies, conclaves, and stratagems. Tasso's self-chosen critics suggested every course but the right one, which was to publish the Jerusalem without further dispute. Tasso, already overworked by his precocious studies, by exciting court life and exhausting literary industry, now grew almost mad with worry. His health began to fail him. He complained of headache, suffered from malarial fevers, and wished to leave Ferrara. The Jerusalem was laid aside in manuscript for a time. He opened negotiations with the court of Florence for an exchange of service. This irritated the Duke of Ferrara, who feared that the Medici might get the coveted dedication of that already famous epic. Therefore, he bore with the poet's humors. Meanwhile, Tasso became the subject of delusions, thought that his servants betrayed his confidence, fancied he had been denounced to the Inquisition, expected daily to be poisoned. In 1576, he quarreled with a Farisi gentleman, Madalo, who had talked to him freely about some love affair. In the summer of 1577, he was relating his sorrows once more to the Princess Lucrezia, when he imagined a servant was listening and rushed on him, knife in hand. He was shut up in a room in the palace, and the Duke then took him to his country seat of Bellarigorado. The often told story, immortalized by Goethe, that a compromising liaison with Leonora de Este came to light, and that Tasso agreed to feign madness in order to cover her honor, must be dismissed. The poet's own temperament and the critics of his Jerusalem Liberata had aggravated his ill health. He was now placed in a Franciscan convent at Ferrara. He escaped at the end of July, disguised himself as a peasant, and went on foot to his sister Cornelia at Sorrento. He seems to have found some peace and healing with his sister, but after a time missed the court circle and asked to return to Ferrara. There his old irritability returned. In the summer of 1578 he ran away again, traveled through Mantua, Padua, Venice, Urbino, Lombardy. In September he reached Turin on foot, and was courteously entertained by the Duke of Savoy. Wherever he went, wandering like the world's rejected guest, he met with the honor due to his illustrious name. But life was intolerable to him outside Ferrara. In February 1579 he returned at an ill-chosen moment. Alfonso was about to contract his third marriage, this time with a princess of the House of Mantua. The princesses did not want to see him. The Duke was engaged. Tasso broke into terms of open abuse and was sent out without ceremony to the madhouse of St. Anna. There he remained for 7 years until July 1586. After the first few months of his incarceration, during which he was treated with the harshness than usual towards the insane, he obtained spacious apartments, received his friends, and went abroad attended by friends. Except for occasional odes or sonnets, some written at request and only rhetorically interesting. A few, like the famous canzone asking for the intercession of Lucrezia and Leonora, inspired by his keen sense of suffering and therefore poignant, he neglected poetry. Long ago his papers had been sequestered. Now, in 1580, he heard that part of the Jerusalem was being published without his permission and without his corrections. Next year, the whole poem was given to the world, and in the following 6 months, 7 editions appeared. The prisoner had no control over his editors, and from the masterpiece which placed him on the level of Petrarch and Ariosto, he never derived 1 penny of pecuniary profit. The fame of the poem rapidly spread throughout Europe. Within 20 years of its publication, it was translated into English, in the well-known version, itself a masterpiece, of Sir Edward Fairfax, Godfrey of Bouillon, or The Recovery of Jerusalem, 1600. A rival poet at the court of Ferrara, Battista Gorini, undertook to revise and re-edit his lyrics in 1582. In 1585, 2 Florentine pedants of the Della Crusca Academy declared war against the Jerusalem. In 1586, Tasso left St. Anna at the solicitation of Vincenzo Gonzaga, Prince of Mantua. He followed his young deliverer to the city by the Mincio, basked a while in liberty and courtly pleasures, enjoyed a splendid reception from his paternal town of Bergamo, and produced a tragedy called Torresmondo, the first sketch of which dates from 1574. But in the autumn of 1587, we find him wandering once more, through Bologna and Loreto, to Rome, where he stayed in the house of an old friend, Scipio Gonzaga, now Patriarch of Jerusalem. Next year he wandered off to Naples, where he wrote his unfinished poem on Monte Oliveto. In 1589 he returned to Rome, but fell ill. The Patriarch in 1590 again received him, but Tasso's restless spirit drove him forth to Florence. The Florentines said, "Actum est de eo," Rome once more, then Mantua, then Florence, then Rome, then Naples, then Rome, then Naples. Such is the weary record of the years 1590 to 94. We have to study a veritable odyssey of malady, indigence, and misfortune. His health grew feebler, and his genius dimmer. In 1592 he gave to the public a revised version of the Jerusalem called the Jerusalem Conquistada. All that made the poem of his early manhood charming he rigidly erased. The versification was degraded. The heavier elements of the plot underwent a dull rhetorical development. During the same year, a poem on the creation in blank verse, called Le Sette Giornate, saw the light. In 1594, Clement VIII and his nephew, Cardinal Aldobrandini of St. Giorgio, invited Tasso to Rome. There he was to assume the crown of bays. As Petrarch, he assumed it on the Capitol. Worn out with illness, Tasso reached Rome in November. The ceremony of his coronation was deferred because Cardinal Aldobrandini had fallen ill, but the Pope assigned him a pension. And, under the pressure of pontifical remonstrance, Prince Avellino, who held Tasso's maternal estate, agreed to discharge a portion of his claims by payment of a yearly rent change. Fortune came too late. Before the crown was worn or the pensions paid, he assented to the convent of Sant Onofrio on a stormy April 1st in 1595. Seeing a cardinal's coach toiling up the steep Trastevere hill, the monks came to the door to greet it. From the carriage stepped Tasso, the Odysseus of many wanderings and miseries, the singer of the Swedish strains, still vocal, and told the prior he was come to die. He passed away on April 25th, 1595, and the cell he occupied became a place of pilgrimage for his admirers. The last 20 years of his existence had been ineffectual. At the age of 31, the Jerusalem, as we have it, was accomplished. The world, too, was already ringing with the music of Aminta. More than this, Tasso had not to give to literature. But those succeeding years of derangement, exile, imprisonment, poverty, and hope deferred endear the man to us.